Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Watts, and I serve as the President and CEO of the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for joining us for our Guiding Growth series, a program to convene our local leaders on a variety of topics impacting our community. We feel that one of the best practices to grow forward is to share conversations and listen with intent. So as we move through today's events, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen a Q&A option. Please use this to submit questions during the presentation. You can also raise your virtual hand if you'd like to ask a question yourself. The series today is presented in partnership with the Town of Gilbert's Office of Economic Development, and today's event is also presented by Chandler-Gilbert Community College. So before I turn it over to Dr. Peterson, I would like to ask Jennifer Graves of the Office of Economic Development to introduce herself.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Jennifer Graves. I serve as the Deputy Director for the Gilbert Office of Economic Development, and I'm delighted to be partnering with the Chamber on this. A long history of partnership through our Partners in Progress initiative, and we think this is a really exciting series to be a part of. So hope you all enjoy it today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. The Gilbert Chamber takes an active role in supporting our education partners and connecting industry to educators because of our business community is the end user in this scenario, and we want to be part of the solution to a strong talent pipeline. As a community, we are so fortunate to have Dr. Peterson leading the charge at Chandler-Gilbert Community College. He's quickly immersed himself in our community, and we greatly value his expertise and his vision. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Peterson as our guest facilitator to lead the discussion on the impact of COVID-19 and related policies on education and workforce. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. First, I have to say, we are so happy to have you in your role. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
It is wonderful. So today I am the president of Gilbert Chandler Community College. And I'm very proud to be a part of this conversation with some amazing colleagues. So I'd like to take a moment and give each colleague a chance to introduce themselves. Then we have a set of questions that we'll move through the panel and then move to an opportunity to hear questions from the audience. So let's go ahead and start with Shane McCord from Gilbert Public Schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shane McCord, Superintendent of Gilbert Public Schools, and just proud to be here and work with everybody, and glad I'm on such a distinguished panel this afternoon.
Thank you, Shane. I'm so excited that we have Cindy Irwin with us from the Center for the Future of Arizona. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you very much. Again, Cindy Irwin, Director of College and Career Pathways with the Center for the Future of Arizona. And thanks so much to Sarah and Greg for inviting me to be on the panel today. I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Yay. We're also really excited to have Sue Wilcox with us from Park University.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks all for having me here today. I'm the Vice President responsible for Park Gilbert, and I'm delighted to be here today with such a distinguished group. Thanks.
We're glad to have you. And last but not least, he who probably does not need an introduction, but Duane Rowan from Arizona State University.
Good afternoon, everybody. Duane Rowan from ASU. I'm a dean of one of the colleges, and I'm the vice provost of the Polytechnic campus. I'm so glad to be with everyone today.
I think it's probably a good place to start is to give each of you an opportunity to provide a brief status update, as there's been a lot of changes in the past few months. Where do things stand right now? We want to start back with Shane.
Thank you, Greg. Where things stand right now, it's July 15th. We are currently working and rolling out 3 models for when students come back. Everybody will be online starting August 5th. And then according to the directive from the governor, we are able to return face-to-face on August 17th. We've given our families 3 options to that they can choose from. They can come back face-to-face with precautionary measures put in place at the school. They can have a flex model where students will, at the elementary level, come 2 days a week for about 5 hours a day and then be online the rest of the time. And then at the secondary level, they will pick and choose whatever core elective classes they have and they want to take on campus, and then they can take the rest online. And then the last option is a full online complement of classes that they can take K-12. So that's where we're at. Parents are choosing, and they will have until Friday to make their selections, and we will take the rest of the time to put staff in place where we need their help. So that's about it.
That's a lot. It's a lot. Sue, how is it looking at Park?
Sure. So we're forging ahead with bringing our student athletes back to campus on 8/10 in compliance with the NAIA and the CalPAC restrictions on student athletics. And we are planning to start our face-to-face classes on August 17th. And, we're hoping for the best and planning for the worst. So if we need to pivot for either of those areas, we're prepared to, and have implemented a lot of precautions, from student housing to our academics to the way we deliver athletics. But we're optimistic that the fall is going to carry on.
Good, good. Duane, how's it like at ASU?
Well, you know, our numbers look great. In summer, we had just under 60,000 students enrolled. Summer is still going on, with over 90,000 course enrollments. For fall, we're currently, as of last Thursday, tomorrow we'll get the updated numbers, we were at 108,000 students for fall. And so our number, and that's ahead of last year. So that's all looking good. We're giving students a lot of options. Students can choose to do face-to-face. They can, and every face-to-face course, with a few exceptions, will have a Zoom component to it. We're calling ASU Sync. Then we're also doing online as well. And we believe that, you know, students should have as many options as possible. So some students, for example, may be here in August at the beginning of the semester, and other students may decide to join us via Zoom at the beginning of the semester and then join us face-to-face later. And of course, we're flexible. We'll turn on a dime. President Crow talks about ASU being like an aircraft carrier or a battleship that needs to maneuver like a surfboard.
That's definitely an image.
Yes.
Thank you, Duane.
Thank you.
Cindy, how are things standing for CFA?
Sure, thank you. Well, obviously we're in a different space than the school district, so some of the reasons I was looking down as you're all talking is that I'm taking notes. So in our Pathways to Prosperity work, we really work across industry, post-secondary, and high school, and down into the middle school level, and work in the greater Phoenix area, Tucson, Yuma, as well as some work in Pinal County and Flagstaff. And so we are really listening to all of you and the pivots and changes that are happening. On the phone with folks from Yuma this morning, superintendents, and what's happening out there. And then we're really just pivoting as we need to, and supporting, looking for, you know, how we can all support you, and really looking for innovative ways to help you continue to advance your work and your goals. So I will say that I have truly been amazingly impressed with how quickly our education partners are moving and changing and just, you know, pulling together and really still advancing work.
You know, I have to say that when we speak about the adaptability and the resilience of our education, the complexities that we're considering and the options, just the variability and options we're providing. Similarly at Chandler-Gilbert, the Maricopa colleges, the variety in options of online, face-to-face, hybrid, those mixes, that we're having many conversations that we weren't necessarily having or at the same level a few months ago. Some of the conversations we're having a few months ago, though, have remained. And I'm going to start this question with Cindy. So as we think, so pre-COVID, we as local education partners were engaging in these strategies, as you mentioned, about changes with the next 5 to 10 years for our workforce, for our business community. Post-COVID, these priorities are accelerated, and so we're going to find ourselves needing to respond even more rapidly. What do you think we need to do within the next 12 months to realign ourselves with the needs of our employers?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think really part of it is truly listening, convening, collaborating. I mean, I think and really convening and collaborating with a large group of employers. I think that's one of our challenges in the education and workforce space, that sometimes we have some really prominent employers who are very engaged, but sometimes more difficult to move out to a wider group of employers. And so I think it's really critical to bring that large group together very purposefully and listen very carefully. And then I think in education, we have to move quickly. And I think as evidenced by what we've seen in the last few months, we can move quickly. So I think we need to listen, we need to move, and then we need to be ready to change rapidly. And I think we all, as communities and partners, we need to be ready to have some things maybe not go so well, and just adapt and continue to change and know that that's okay, and we're all working together to continue to advance, your regional objectives.
Some great thoughts. Would any of the panelists like to add? Duane?
Cindy said it very well. Just one short thing to add, and that is we need to keep in mind that we have such a wide array of kinds of employers, from very large ones to very small ones who are just getting started, and the needs vary immensely. So listening not just to them collectively, but listening to them individually, I think is really important.
And that takes some balance in trying to navigate those conversations. Other thoughts?
Greg, I think at the K-12 level, and granted, when it's reconnecting with our employers, we're usually talking about our secondary students, our high school students, and programs in which they can serve our community. I think as a K-12 system, we are, like everybody else, about people and relationships, and those relationships over since March have been online, and they will continue to be at least the beginning of the school year. So we have to kind of reintroduce ourselves to society as an education system, and we have to take care of the social emotional needs of our kids and our staff. Our staff is going through a lot, just like our families are, and so we have to recognize that. And Cindy, as you said, we gotta move quick. There are definitely some things that we have to move quick on. We also have to slow down so we don't run anything over, because there are a lot of things that students are given on a daily basis that they haven't been, and we have to recognize that and be patient.
I think it's significant that we're not making small changes. So this isn't tweaking that we're moving through. These are significant changes that are happening. And so as Shane mentions, that really then impacts the multifacet of our students as we think through these. There have been, oh, Sue.
I just wanted to say that I agree with everybody. My initial reaction to this was to assess and adjust and accelerate our delivery mechanisms and the way we're working together. But as I thought about it a little bit more deeply, I think there's also a need for us to double down on delivering the foundational elements that we were hearing before COVID, delivering problem-solving skills and the ability to resolve unstructured problems, critical thinking, and a lifelong learner. So I think there's an opportunity that employers are still desperate, and I'd love Cindy to weigh in on this, for effective communication skills and folks who can think critically and outside of the box and are engaged in lifelong learning. So while I think we can modify, I think we can double down on the stuff that we know we need to do well also.
One of the things I know as we have these conversations is often we start talking about resources to support this work. And there are additional funds being made available to support unemployed and incumbent workers in advancing their education. What do these types of funding opportunities look like in other different areas and different levels? And how are you making the most of these funds?
Well, I can start by noting that if you look at the CARES funding that ASU has received, we are devoting a lot of those funds to support students on a needs-based basis. Because our goal is to get people to the finish line, because we know that when students get to the finish line, their opportunities increase dramatically. Go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at their chart on post-secondary attainment and family income, weekly income, and unemployment rates. And so we need to be committed to that. So we're using that money as much as we possibly can to help students get to the finish line who might not otherwise be able to get there.
Thank you.
Greg, on our end, we're the ones furthering their education, so we got to get them out of high school first. But we've utilized the money because we have programs that are self-funded, like our community education programs, our food service programs that we had to sustain per the governor's order in terms of being paid March through the end of June. And so we've utilized some of that money to help pay for those programs. Those aren't dollars that are given to us by the state. Like I said, those are self-generated dollars from those programs. When those programs can't operate, put the deficit, we'll take the rest of the money and apply it to any supplies or needs related to COVID-19 in terms of reopening. And when we do enter face-to-face, to make sure that we have all of the appropriate safety materials.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'll just jump in with one thing on that, where again, we're in a little different space. And I just want to share an analogy that maybe many of you have heard, this analogy of babies moving down the stream, right? There are babies going down the stream, and there are people that need to pull the babies out of the water right now. So I think Duane and Shane, some of the things you're talking about, we need to pull those babies out of the water immediately. But then there's also that notion that there've also got to be some people looking at, why are the babies coming down the stream, right? How do we stop that? How do we change that? And I think that's a place where for CFA we've seen and we're paying attention to what are some of those opportunities for funding that are really looking at those systems pieces or innovation pieces, and really kind of what can we creatively do and innovate to be prepared for what's happening now, but also then what's happening in the future, and really reimagine where we're at. And I think we've got to have both, obviously.
Thank you. Sue, would you like to add anything?
That was such a powerful analogy, Cindy. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think as far as the CARES funding goes, Park's focus was to use that to enhance the student experience, whether that be to help students who are in need, or from the administrative side to bolster the infrastructure to ensure that we had the resources in order to deliver that experience, provide technology for students who didn't have the necessary technology, and enhance our student support mechanisms for remote learning. But I think that was the mantra, or the guiding principle for us, was to ensure that whatever funding was available there was utilized to enhance the student experience directly.
So as we talk about this funding, so really supporting pulling the babies out of the river, a lot of this CARES Act funding, as you're hearing, really be using that in strategic ways. The community colleges have taken a similar approach, as well as there is other funding available through the Workforce Investment Act, Opportunities Act. So WIOA, there is some funding coming from the federal government for short-term training for unemployed incumbent workers. So really looking at those opportunities to be able to provide short-term training to leverage those resources for our local community. One other thing that we've done at the community college is reduced our out-of-state. We know we have a lot of people moving to Arizona, and typically it takes a year for residency to pay the in-state tuition. So those who are coming to be able to move more quickly, we have reduced the out-of-state cost to in-state for the first 6 credits each semester to help facilitate that as well. So those are some different opportunities that you can hear across our institutions in supporting the funds that are available to really leverage movement for people in the workforce. My next question, opening up to the panel, would be, I think we've all talked a little bit to it, and I think Cindy mentioned it. We had a significant skills gap before the pandemic with an estimated 7 million jobs unfilled in some really key areas such as nursing, manufacturing, and IT. The COVID-19 has only exacerbated that. And so how do we plan for our learners to fill those skills gaps as we move into the future? Would anyone like to take a swing? Duane, I see Duane.
So we need, I'll think about it maybe just a little bit more generally, and that is we need to think about, what does each individual need at various points in the career? Pre-career learning, early career learning, mid-career learning, late career learning, and be working with employers so we understand what their needs are, but then also be working with learners and figuring out what each individual needs. And so we need to get away from this notion of what traditional education has looked like. And so we need to do a lot more with technology to make it easier for people to access this learning. This week, for example, ASU hosted a conference called Remote for educators, and there were tens of thousands of people who participated in that conference from around the world. And if we had done this in a traditional way that, as conferences get done, there's no way we would have had tens of thousands of people there. And the people who presented were all over the world as well, certainly all over the United States. And so I got to learn from some of the best in the technology fields and in other fields as well. So I think that's an important part of it. And we need to, instead of thinking about, all right, you do this at this point in your life and you learn this at this point in your life. No, we say to learners, here are all the things we have to offer. You can engage at them at any point in your life to get to where you want to be to enter the market or job market, or to enhance your skills in the job market. Upskilling is an important part of this.
I think that's really well said, Duane. The notion that educators have been in the business of education for ever to collect and disseminate knowledge. We have an opportunity to do that in a more meaningful way at a pace of change that we haven't had before. So the pandemic, I think, has facilitated a pace of rapid change or rapid thought process in higher ed. I think we have the opportunity to better serve students' needs for a lifetime. And that is one of the foundations of Park University as a whole. So as we founded Park Gilbert, we brought in a few programs that I think were targeted for what the Phoenix area needed: criminal justice and business administration and fitness and wellness programs. But we have a large stable of programs out of the mother campus that we can accreditate and bring here. So I think it's an interesting prospect. What's the right time? What's the market for nursing or IT degrees, for example, that we could easily bring here and partner with our educational partners in order to deliver those services. So we're constantly looking at that.
And I think, Greg, I'll add one thing. I think, great examples of our education institutions really adapting and looking at different types of programs and certifications and skills. And I think one of the other things that's really important for us to think about, how do we then get that information into the hands of our students and families, and how do we really help them understand what are those high needs opportunities out there, what exists what opportunities do they have, and really help our students have the agency to understand those opportunities and then to really make those selections, those choices for themselves. And I agree, again, there's no longer this sort of go to school, sort of stop, start a job, stop, go back to school, get your promotion. That is really this continuous cycle. But we really need to, I think, be very purposeful about sharing that message with our communities about those opportunities.
And then if I could just add one more thing, one of the things that we're doing a lot more of now is looking at stackable credentials within degree programs. So, what's a certificate that we could offer to an employee, and then maybe another certificate and another certificate, and then we say, you know what, if you do one more certificate, we'll give you a degree.
Right. So really to build the ongoing learning into the systems. Mm-hmm. There's a piece I wanted to come back to that Shane mentioned earlier. So we talk about preparing students, as Cindy mentioned, understanding what the options are, be able to move through, and then as Duane and Sue talked about, changing our structures to move them through. Shane, you mentioned earlier about the social emotional aspect. How do we take that into consideration as we're thinking about preparing students to be able to move forward through these new systems?
I think what you have to do is, and I think I said it earlier, is listen. Every student's going to come out of quarantine or out of this and into face-to-face with different needs. Some, they just needed to get out of their house and back to school. Others, this is really taking its toll on them. And again, remember, I'm talking K through 12 students. And so that's where we have to make sure our staff is trained up on being able to identify the needs of the students in their class, making sure our social workers and our counselors are connected. And then, you talked at the beginning, this is about a gap. We have some learning gaps that are, yes, we did online last spring, and as we like to say, we pivoted extremely well, I think, into that, but that didn't replace brick and mortar. And we're starting off the year there, but it's a different program using Florida Virtual K-12, which is a more robust program, and grades will be taken in the whole 9 yards. So it'll be a different mix for our teachers and for our students, but we're all up for the task. And so looking down the road, when, for our high school kids, our CTE programs are primarily, several of them are hands-on. And yet again, here we are not being able to do those hands-on. So what I've seen last spring and what I believe I'll see beginning of this school year is how innovative our teachers can be with students online to be able to give them the best experience possible related to some of those programs. But I think you will see some of those students have more interest in those CTE programs moving forward. Take nursing, for an instance. I think out of this, they're the heroes coming out of this COVID crisis, or that we're in the middle of. And I think their profession, as in my opinion, has already been looked at as being something very high. But I think people put an even higher value to what they do. So I think we'll see some definite interest in those areas. But again, until we get face some of those experiences be as good.
I wanted to build on that question for the rest of the panel. So thinking about, I think as Shane said so well, thinking about the students, their different needs as they're experiencing this, thinking about how we offer some of our programs. And Chandler-Gilbert is similar. We have some of our career technical education programs that are very hands-on in person. I don't know that I would trust an airplane mechanic that has not worked on an airplane, right? There's these things that are built in. So as we think about how the current conditions are changing, how we offer programs, how students are impacted in them, how do we see that impacting students as they move into the workforce? Are we worried that we might leave some students behind, or will their experiences significantly change?
So one of the toughest areas when we made the transition in March to all remote was in our lab science courses. And what we discovered was we did a whole bunch of different things to make it work. So we looked at commercial products, we looked at YouTube videos. You know, I can't tell you how many things I've learned to repair at home just by watching YouTube videos. And so we relied on them. In some cases where we couldn't find a lab experiment, we had our lab assistants who were already hired for the semester to do the lab experience, and we recorded it, made it available to students, and had students reflect on that. So it's not quite the same thing as handling that test tube or that body part, but it is really close. The other thing I want to say at this point is this quotation is attributed to all sorts of different people, so I'm not sure what the source was, but never let a crisis go to waste. And one of the things that this is a really golden opportunity, going back to the emotional growth of our students, to help them get through this. And then once we get through this, to talk with them and say, look at the resilience that you have developed as a result of this, and think about how that resilience is going to serve you extremely well the rest of your life.
Thank you, Duane.
No, I'd like to add a little. I have a 21-year-old son, and will be teaching this fall. I student taught 26 years ago, and his experience is going to be much different than mine to start off with. He's starting off online, and I've thought a lot about this over the past couple of months. And Duane, you talked about being resilient, you know, whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 21 years old. He and I have had a lot of conversations about this and just kind of strategizing how he's going to approach it. And he doesn't look at it like he's getting a less of an experience. He in his mind, he's like, okay, well, this will be something different. And, you know, that nobody else would have gotten to experience their student teaching career until now. So it is how you wrap that present. It is about how it's presented, and a lot of this at the end of the day, coming out of it, it's about attitude and what we can do to ensure that we've learned from some of the circumstances we've been dealt with, but how we turn whatever may be negative into a positive. And I think that's what our teachers have done and have been doing. Our teachers will come out of this with many more skills than they had going into it, whether they wanted to or not. They've got them, and they're going to be able to be a little more innovative in their classrooms because of that, related to technology. And so trying to find the silver lining in anything, I think that's what we need to do for students to be able to.
I think that's right on. I mean, the attitude and aptitude and the flexibility that we've all demonstrated through this is pretty incredible. But I think our students are missing that social interaction. They're missing the student engagement. They're missing the competition and the interaction and the campus life components. So we're going to try to reproduce that as we can. But a large component of our athletic and academic delivery is community service and serving those who serve us. And so one of the things I'm struggling with, or have been given a lot of thought to, is what does that look like for our student athletes who actually have a community service component that they're responsible for? What does that look like for our academics, where we integrate things like service minors, or the ability to be able to do grant and nonprofit work for credit? And I think a component of that really is community engagement and engagement with people. And so we're working hard to think through what that might look like. We don't have all of the answers yet, but we're trying to put together programs for our athletes to engage. And we did do a grant program in the spring where a class had the opportunity to award a grant as a class project, but they needed to do all of that pre-work to say, you know, what are our requirements? How are we going to select it? And that went quite well online and gave them some common objectives and goals to work toward in a project base. But I guess my point is engagement, community engagement is a big part of our curriculum, and that's been interrupted. So we're looking for ways to re-engage in that.
And Greg, I just want to recognize too, to that question, the education and the communities and the industries that have come together to really look at our high need students and address our high need students and students for whom, you know, online doesn't come easily, and our teachers for whom online doesn't come easily, and maybe they don't have the technology or the supports or, you know, many other kind of issues they might have in communities. Schools that have really come together and tried to work on that. It's not a problem that's easy to solve, as all of you know, because you're in the middle of that. But I just want to recognize that folks are worried about students and looking for how to address them. I'm hearing that from every community that I talk to across the state.
And Cindy, I think you bring up a really good point. As we think about the student in their totality, and we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that for them to learn, they have to be able to focus. And so there's these other needs that need to be addressed and support. I know initially in the conversation about some of the resources available, some of that conversation was that there are funds that are being available to support students with the greatest need. As we go into the fall semester, the more that we can partner with our community local community organizations to support families and students as well, I think it's going to have a significant impact. We have one more question as we wrap up, and then we'll open up questions for our audience. So we've touched on this, I think, multiple times. We've talked about just how quickly things are changing and how COVID-19 has really been an accelerator for a lot of these trends that were already happening. I think we've all mentioned in different ways about these pathways for students and the interconnection of career and learning on a continuum. Would you agree that we're going to see more convergence between careers and that learning in the future?
I'll jump in with that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy. No, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, I'll just kick that off briefly to say, I think absolutely. I mean, I think we were seeing that convergence before, and I think, you know, we're seeing that even more so now, and that'll continue. And Shane, you talked about having a 21-year-old. I have an 18-year-old daughter who just graduated from high school and is leaving for university in a few weeks, quite in a much different environment than we would have anticipated. And I think about the need for really all of us to kind of build those entrepreneurial skills, those flexibility skills, that resilience, and gosh, whether you wanted to or not, you found yourself, you know, building some of those skills. But I think as we look forward to really think about what are those essential skills that we really need to support our students in learning. And I think some of those things are if not changing, they're certainly being given different priorities, right?
And I'll just briefly add to what Cindy said so well, and that is, you know, look at the jobs that exist today that did not exist 10 years ago, or look at jobs that did exist 10 years ago that don't exist now. And that's not just going to keep at the same pace. That's going to accelerate. And so we have to have this relationship between continuing education and the workforce. We'll have no choice.
I think that it goes along with what you were saying. You know, we're talking about what can education do, I think we first got to step back and look at what did businesses do? We need to remember that they were thrown into the same situation. Their businesses were shut down to a degree. They did remote working, and so I bet that they have learned that they have different needs than what they thought they needed to begin with. And so I think that's where the collaboration comes in with education. We can't assume we know what they need. They have to step back and go, you know what? I didn't need 15 people in this general area. I needed 10, and maybe I need 5 more in this area, because guess what? Productivity is different. And, profits went up because we're more efficient in a lot of different ways. Or I didn't know my business had the capability to do something like that. I filled a gap that I didn't even know existed. And so that's where I think education comes in. Our kids, once those gaps are realized, we can help them fill it with our.
I think building on that, Shane, so example really of understanding and working with those needs and seeing where those gaps are. So for an example of that would be, I know the Maricopa Community Colleges announced this week a partnership with the Arizona Commerce Authority, US Vets, and Microsoft to provide micro credentials, micro certifications for veterans, specifically in desktop administration, networking, data analytics, some of those key skills that really they can leverage to move into open positions. So looking at, I think as Duane mentioned earlier, those stackable credentials or stackable skills that can help individuals move more quickly into gaps as they're being identified. Okay. So that wraps up our main questions. We'll look to see at the chat, as well as if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question. So our first question we have, our questions answers, in what ways can community members help our schools, colleges, and universities right now? So how can our community members help schools, colleges, and universities now?
One thing that all of us can be doing is having conversations with students who are finishing high school, who have just finished high school, or are thinking about, they finished their associate's degree, thinking about transferring, or they're in the workforce and maybe they're not working right now, is to remind people that this is a great time to get additional education, a terrific time to do it, so that when the job market does get better, you're ready to roll.
I think in K-12, I think, more than anything, probably patience and understanding. We've delivered, a model of education in a certain way since education started. And we've been thrust into a whole different world, really. And I have teachers who have been out there teaching face-to-face for 30 years. And, in March, I told them they had to go online and start doing this. And so that's difficult. And we have parents who haven't had to help with a lot of those things at home because we took care of it. We were proud to take care of it. Now I just think it's time that we have to strengthen that relationship between school and home and understand that we're all in this together and we're all working towards a common goal, and that's making sure your child gets the very best education they can.
Sue, what thoughts, chat?
No, I think those were both terrific points. And, I think support and understanding, we're seeing statistics that, 27% or some high percentage of college students are thinking about not returning back to their campus that they left. And, I think to Duane's point, education now is a really important component. And understand that higher ed is more than classroom learning. It really is a lifestyle learning, and we're committed to trying to provide that student experience again going into the fall, but we may need to pivot again. Our mantra is to the safety of our students first, and then we'd like to not break the law and adhere to the things that are outlined by the conferences we serve. But then we really are focused on student engagement and the experience and the academic delivery component. While we have plans to do all of that, the one thing that I'm really certain of is that we'll have an opportunity to pivot from those plans and do it differently than what we think we're going to do. So patience and understanding and trust that we really do have the safety of our faculty and staff and students in mind, and we do want to do that in a way that meets the community standards that are outlined, whether they be federal, state, or local government or governing agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we presented to our governing board last night, and I showed them a picture of a book that I made. It was Leading Higher Education Institutions in a COVID-19 Pandemic for Dummies, the Special Arizona edition. That book does not exist. The next question we have is, how will your school or college provide services like food service, residential life, tutoring, etc. this fall?
In Gilbert schools, we will continue what we've done since the beginning of this, and that is hand out meals to our students who are 18 years or younger. We'll have 9 locations up until we're able to go face-to-face, and then even then, we will try to figure out a way to supplement those families that are online. It's been very successful, 3,000-4,000 meals a day that we've been handing out, and I'm very proud of the work that our food service department has done, and they take pride in what they do, as well they should, because they're standing out there in the middle of the heat, making sure these families are taken care of within our community. And that speaks a lot about what educational institutions do for communities. For the tutoring aspect, we don't have resident life. We don't have anybody bunking at our campuses, so we're okay there. But for tutoring, coming up, we'll be able to do that online as well. If there's ways that we can figure out, have smaller groups of kids together on a campus at some point in time for those needs, then we definitely do that. But primarily it'll be one-on-one or 1-on-3 in a WebEx type situation. Make sure that those students have what they need.
We need to make sure that that we recognize your food service providers as heroes in this time as well.
So starting where Sue started with, the number one priority is health and safety of everybody in the organization. And so with that in mind, tutoring will be primarily, if not exclusively, online. We've done a lot of that over the years. But then food service on campus will be done. There will not be any, right now the plans are not to have any dining in a dining facility. So students can go pick up food, it'll be prepackaged, they take it, go eat it somewhere where it's easy to maintain social distancing. Everyone on campus will be expected to wear face masks, so it's hard to eat in a dining hall wearing a face mask, so we're not going to do that. And then also in our classes, we do give students the option of being there face-to-face or through Zoom, but social distancing will be required and mask wearing will be required as well.
Sue, would you like to add?
Well, from a tutoring perspective, Park University serves over 40 campuses. So we've gotten very good at remote tutoring and providing services across that campus network. But I think here in Gilbert, we've done a lot of what we've called mentoring. And so every student that we're engaged with has a mentoring phone call, which we proactively place twice a week. And one of those sessions is to help the student understand what their goals and objectives are. If they're missing those goals and objectives, to help them get the services that they need in order to be academically successful. So that's been unique to this particular campus. And we have two folks who are pretty dedicated to making those phone calls. So we're excited to carry that piece on. Food service has not been something that we've offered yeah, for lots of reasons. So that's not one that I'll go into. But we do offer some student housing. We actually rent local apartments. And so we do have protocols in place where we're doing housing assignments by athletic team to try to minimize the spread, contact spread beyond, the natural stuff that's going to happen with student athletics. We've also put precautions in place for isolation protocol should we need to do that. Baseline testing for all of the students when they come on campus. And then self-monitoring, we're putting an automated system in place in order to do the self-monitoring that's hopefully will help us be proactive. So that's a lot of rambling for what our approach is.
Yeah, we're asking everybody to self-monitor every day as well. So,
no, I think thank you. I think it provides a view into just the complexity of all of the different pieces that we're navigating in order to ensure we're providing the safest and healthiest environment for students. So thank you. I think it's time to turn back over to Sarah. Thank you, panelists. This was a wonderful conversation.
thanks for the opportunity.
I want to thank all of you for your time today, for the energy that you're putting in to give Gilbert the best education experience that you can. I am grateful for the partnerships with each of you. You bring so much to the table and you're open to conversation and willing to take the lead. And I just want you to know that from the business community, we're so grateful for what you bring and your dedication. So thanks for your time today. And we did record this, so you can catch us later. If you know someone who missed it, feel free to forward it. It will be on YouTube. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.